Hej og velkommen til Goecker Live. Tak fordi I kigger med derude. Det er rigtig dejligt. I dag så skal vi kigge på to Canon-kameraer, to populære kameraer, som til dels lapper over, specielt når vi snakker om videoproduktion. Og det er jo EOS C70 og EOS R5-kameraerne, vi taler om her. I denne her video, der vil vi prøve at klæde dig rigtig godt på til at træffe et valg mellem de to kameraer, hvis du står og overvejer at skulle ind i noget videoproduktion og kigger på de to modeller. Selvfølgelig kan vi ikke forhindre, at du køber et af hver, det kan man også. Men ellers vil du få nogle gode argumenter for begge kameraer, som du så kan holde op imod, hvad det er for nogle krav og specifikationer, du lægger vægt på. Til at hjælpe os med at give svar på det her, der har vi hooket op med en engelsk videoproducent, specialist i color grading. Han hedder Ollie Kenchington, og ham kobler vi over til, når der er gået en 10 minutters tid. Han har et produktionsselskab over i England og har haft det lige siden 2008. Det hedder Korro Films, og han producerer reklamefilm og dokumentarfilm i en rimelig høj kvalitet. I skal prøve at tjekke hans hjemmeside ud en dag. Han har noget af en teknisk kapacitet, som sagt, og han har forberedt et indlæg omkring forskellene og hvad der lapper over på de her to kameraer, vi skal snakke om i dag. Med os lokalt har vi også Stefan Vibe, vores repræsentant for Canon. Stort velkommen til dig.
Tak skal du have, Morten.
Stefan skal være vores medvært i dag og vil byde ind på forskellige temaer omkring de her kameraer. Og så ved jeg også, at du har forberedt en kort præsentation, en Canon-update på, hvad der sker lige nu her fra Canon. Ja. Specielt omkring en række nye firmware, som er kommet til EOS-kameraerne, som vil forbedre din kamera ganske væsentligt på en række felter. Ja. Og det er jo, firmware er jo ganske gratis ting, der kommer fra Canon, som man installerer på kameraet. Så glæder jeg lige til det. Og jamen, skal vi ikke bare starte med det? Velkommen til, Stefan. Igen.
Ja, tak skal du have,
Det var dejligt, at du kunne komme.
Ja, jamen, tak for invitationen. Og ja, ganske rigtigt. Det handler jo om video i dag, og video med Canon, og specifikt også R5 og C70. Og det, som jeg rigtig gerne vil bruge de her 10 minutter på, det er at tale lidt om de her gratis firmware-updates, som vi lige har lanceret til Cinema EOS-kameraerne, og for ganske nylig også har lanceret til EOS R5-kameraet, som netop gør det til to betragteligt bedre kameraer at arbejde med video med. Ja. Og jamen altså, firmware-updates, det kommer på baggrund af feedback fra brugerne. Så tusind tak for alle jer, som køber Canons produkter, og tusind tak for den grundige og gode feedback, vi får tilbage fra jer, så vi kan være med til at gøre produkterne bedre. Og jeg vil gerne lige dykke ned i de updates, som jeg står her og taler om, og som Morten står og taler om. Og som sagt, så er nogle af firmware-updatesene allerede tilgængelige. Det er til EOS R5, og lige om lidt, i slutningen af den her måned, bliver firmware-updatesene til C70 tilgængelige på vores support-site. Ja.
Det er også noget, Goecker følger med i hele tiden, og hvis ikke I følger intenst med ind på Canon support-site, så plejer vi også lige at poste det på vores forskellige platforme og fortælle, når der er kommet nye firmware.
Det er nemlig rigtigt, ja. Så for at tale om Cinema EOS-kameraerne, så er der kommet, der kommer den her nye updates til også C500 Mark II. Produktion med anamorfisk optik, det har været og bliver endnu mere udbredt. Og vores C500 Mark II har jo netop den her mulighed for at understøtte anamorfiske optikker. Men nu får man mulighed for, når vi optager i RAW, at kunne optage i 4:3-format eller i 6:5-format. Og det er især brugbart, fordi datamængden på den baggrund bliver reduceret, så det bliver mere håndterbart i det videre forløb for postproduktionen. Og det samme, når vi skal maske vores monitor af, så har vi selvfølgelig også mulighed for at maske formaterne af, så vi ved, hvad vi arbejder med.
Det følger med over på søgeren, simpelthen?
Det følger der med på alle udgangene fra kameraerne. Ja. Vi har hele tiden haft de-squeeze-faktor i C500-kameraet og C300-kameraet. Og nu får vi addet den her option på Cooks anamorfiske optikker, så vi kan de-squeeze 1,8 gange også. Og det betyder jo lige pludselig, at produktionen kan blive enormt high-end og meget mere alsidig af valg af optikker.
Ja, for netop den objektivserie her er super high-end.
Det er super high-end.
Sine objektiver.
Ja, bestemt. Men det er blevet taget super godt imod, at vores 2 kameraer her jo kan tilkøbes en mount, som er udskiftelig, så vi på den måde kan gå fra EF-mountet til PL-mountet på kameraerne. Mm. Og nyt, ikke mindst, det er jo ligesom, vi står her og sætter live nu. Jamen altså, så har vi jo for ganske nylig introduceret vores nye PTZ-line-up af kameraer, pan, tilt, zoom-kameraer. Ja. Og de kører IP-baseret, og med vores C300 og C500, der kan vi med vores Extension Unit 1 eller Extension Unit 2 også få mulighed for at køre IP. Og Canons XC-protokol kommer til at ligge på tværs af vores produktrange, og vil kunne understøtte hen over produkter, og på den måde kan mixe produkterne i vores live-produktioner.
Ja, så de 2 kameraer kan arbejde sammen i den samme produktion?
De 2 kameraer kan arbejde sammen i den samme produktion, og de kan arbejde sammen med vores PTZ-kamera, sådan. Ja.
Og ideen med PTZ er jo, at det er en form for robotkamera, som kan man sige automatiserer produktionen lidt. Man behøver ikke have en person henne ved kameraet og stå og zoome og styre det, men man styrer det fra et centralt sted.
Ja. Mange typer produktioner. En produktion som også i dag, eller en produktion som også kan være ude af huset i et hurtigere setup, fordi det er en relativt mobil måde at arbejde på også. Ja.
Men tilført Canons rigtig gode videokvalitet.
Ja. Og styring af kameraet eksternt.
Ja. Good.
Og så til også live-produktion, men lige sådan her, at vi får output-support ud af vores 12G SDI-udgang på både C500 og C300-kameraet. Jamen, der kan vi få outputtet ud af både monitor og HDMI, også simultant, så at vi kan have flere skærme kørende, samtidig med, at vi optager eksternt på kameraet. Så det er igen især en brugerfeedback, vi har fået på den her del af firmware-updatesene, så det er vi jo selvfølgelig glade for. Ja. Mm. Og med C70-kameraet, der var vi jo det første kamera, der introducerede, at vi kunne tilføje .cube-files på vores optagelser. Og det gør sig gældende, når vi optager ned på kameraet i huset, eller vi optager ud af kameraet på vores kamera, men også vi viewer på en monitor eksternt, hvad det er, vi optager, og vores proxyfil er lige sådan. Mm-hmm. Så det introducerede vi med C70'eren, og nu bliver det også tilgængeligt for C300 Mark III og C500 Mark II, så vi faktisk kan lave et færdigt stykke arbejde allerede på location, hvis det er den type opgave, man har. Så en utrolig fleksibel måde at kunne arbejde på, og en hurtig måde at kunne arbejde på den her måde. Og ikke mindst, C300 og C500 får den her power saving mode, så vi kan spare lidt på strømmen, hvis det er en lang arbejdsdag. Og det kan vi jo være glade for også at få den mulighed. Mm-hmm. Specifikt med C70, autofokusen er jo rigtig, rigtig god på C70'eren. Som det har været på Cinema EOS, så har vi haft det her small area eller large area at arbejde i. Men det nye her nu er, at C70'eren får det her whole area at arbejde i. Så vi får udnyttelse af, man kan sige, hele området af 80% af sensorarealet med dual pixels autofocus. Så det er også en klar forbedring, fordi det også linker rigtig godt op til den autofokus-algoritme, som Canon har lagt i det her kamera. Ja. Og den måde, man også gerne vil arbejde på med den her type kamera, som er meget mere mobilt og fleksibelt. Og
det var den firmware-version, som næsten er ved at være release, hvornår var det, den kom?
30. juni kommer firmware-versionen til C70, og 31. juli kommer firmware-versionerne til C300 og C500. Ja.
Godt, så der er noget at glæde sig til her.
Ja, bestemt noget at glæde sig til. Og lige sådan får vi også touch-muligheden, mens vi arbejder i whole area, så touch-muligheden på vores skærm bagpå, hvor vi kan aktivere autofokus, og vi kan tracke med autofokusen. Ja. Så bliver C500, C300 og C70, de får en custom profile C06, som kommer til at gå igen på de 3 kameraer, så de kan linkes op meget, meget nemt med den her farveprofil. Og det er med BT709-standarden, som de alle 3 arbejder ud fra.
Okay, den kender jeg så ikke, men udbyttet er, at man kan arbejde med den samme farveprofil på forskellige kameraer.
Ja, og vi har tidligere haft den samme fagprofil på Custom Mode 1 med Wide DR, hvor det dynamiske omfang er en lille smule højere. Her bliver det pakket en anelse mere, så det er mere klar til brug, end det ellers har været. Ja. Igen. Okay. Også for produktioner med en lidt kortere deadline.
Ja. Spændende.
Ja. Så igen for C70'eren, jamen altså 30. juni her, der kommer vi til at understøtte flere EF-optikker, end vi har gjort tidligere. Vi startede med 3 optikker, da vi satte kameraet til salg her i december, men nu får vi også mulighed for at bruge vores 70-200, både i f2.8 og f4. Og det, der så kommer til at ske senere på året, er en lille teaser for, at vi vil komme til at understøtte endnu flere af vores EF-optikker og sine primes yderligere, og fortsætte med at forstå også, at den her adapter til vores C70-kamera, den her 0,71 gange mount adapter, jamen den er super godt modtaget af folk derude, for der er rigtig mange, der har været glade for at lave video med deres EF-optikker i rigtig mange år efterhånden, og der er rigtig mange EF-optikker derude, der er gode at producere på. Så der sker mere end allerede nu.
Spændende.
Ja, og der får man jo selvfølgelig data overført gennem mount-adapteren for de understøttede objektiver, både optisk korrektion, blænde, autofokus og dual pixels autofokus, og vi får display-muligheder på kameraet for, hvad for nogle indstillinger optikken har.
Okay. Så den objektivadapter har en optik i sig? Der foregår noget optisk i den? Eller
der foregår netop noget optisk i den, ja. 0,71 adapteren har glas til at forstørre på kameraets sensor, så man bibeholder den brændvidde, som optikken har, som EF-optikken har.
Okay.
Og det vil så sige, at en 2470-optik, jamen det er en 2470-optik af vores EF-optikker. Ja. Men udover det, så deler kameraen jo netop mount, og det er jo dejligt, at man kan bruge sine optikker på kryds og tværs af de her 2 kameraer, R5 og C70.
Ja, og de er jo, skal vi sige, fremtidssikre med, at de er født med RF-mounten.
Ja, det må man sige. Ja. En lille justering også til, at når man bruger mount-adapteren, jamen altså, så kan man få sin small, large eller full frame autofocus assist. Den kan man turne on and off, så det ikke er i vejen og forstyrre det billede, man er i gang med at arbejde ud fra. Ja. Så her efter sommerferien, så kommer der spændende nyt firmware til EOS R5. Og det betyder, at kameraet kan understøtte vores CNE 18-80 mm og CNE 70-200 mm med den rigtige EOS R mount adapter. Ja. Vi har vores almindelige, vi har en med kontrolring, og så har vi den her med de forskellige filtre mulighed. Og det understøtter så optikken, så vi får en optisk korrektion mellem optik og kamera, netop fordi at optikken er følt som en Super 35 størrelse optik, og så på et full frame kamera, så skal der justeres til, og det sørger firmwaren for i R5-kameraet, men også det, at optikken også skal blive firmware-opdateret. Så her er det både optikken og kameraet, der når det bliver tilgængeligt efter sommerferien, skal opdateres. Men så man netop ud over optisk korrektion får operation af optikken, fokus, zoom, metadata overført, så det bliver en videooptik til et videokamera, kan man også sige.
Ja, for de kendetegn ved de her CN-objektiver er jo netop, at det er dedikerede video-CN-objektiver. Ja.
Og R5'eren er jo blevet enormt godt taget imod til video, så det her det er en afledt manøvre af det, for at ligesom at åbne op for at bruge vores videooptikker til også. Og det man også kan, det er så at styre optikken på sin zoom-controller, eller også sin fokus-controller, så zoom og fokus kan blive styret fra Canons 2 controller. Og det gør man ved, at man sætter sit kabel over i optikken, og så videre til de 2 controller. Ja. Og på den måde, så får man enten mulighed for at gøre det on stage foran sit kamera, eller gøre det på afstand via sin EOS Utility software eller sin Camera Connect app.
Ja, super. Jeg skal lige huske at sige, at der kommer rigtig mange informationer nu her, og hvis nogen sidder inde med nogle spørgsmål, så skal I bare skyde løs, både på vores Facebook og vores YouTube-kanal, der følger vi med, og vi forsøger at få svar på dem her undervejs, og hvis ikke vi når det, så skal vi nok vende tilbage på de her 2 tråde, og så få svaret på jeres spørgsmål. Så skyd bare løs, hvis I sidder inde med noget.
Ja. Jamen altså, og så er det egentlig lige for at runde lidt af her. I sidste måned, så kom vi med firmware version 1.3.1 til EOS R5, og det åbnede også nogle rigtig fine muligheder op for levende billeder. Blandt andet det, at kameraet nu kan optage 120 frames i fuld HD, og det billede, det er faktisk et 4K oversamlet billede, der bliver lavet i fuld HD, så det er en rigtig fin kvalitet.
Ja.
Så får man muligheden for at køre en lavere bitrate, når man optager RAW, og man får også muligheden for at lave en mere komprimeret MOV-fil, så det er hurtigt at sende og ikke fylder så meget. Og dernæst får kameraet Canon Log 3, som jo netop går igen fra vores Canon C70, Canon C300, Canon C500, så der er en rød tråd
koblet sammen. Ja.
gennem de 4 kameraer til videoproduktion. Og så også, at man kan gemme indstillingerne på kortet, så alle de settings, man har lavet, dem kan man gemme og dele som om kamera, eller
hvis man lejer et ekstra kamera.
Hvis man lejer et ekstra kamera, ja. Lige præcis. Ja.
Super.
Og så sidst, men ikke mindst, en lille godbid også, det er, at den firmware, der kommer senere på sommeren til understøttelse af vores Cine zoom-optikker, jamen det bliver også en firmware, som kommer til at understøtte Adobe ProRes RAW. Så den nye Atomos Ninja 5 Plus, den kommer også til at blive understøttet af EOS R5.
Fantastisk. Altid.
Det bliver sjovt.
Jeg skal huske at sige, at hvis I sidder derude og tænker firmware, er der noget, vi selv kan gøre, så ja, er oplægget jo, at det kan man godt. Men vi ser faktisk rigtig mange fotografer, eller en del fotografer, der kommer ind med ret nye kameraer, men med den allerførste version af firmwaren. Og det er altså en mulighed, I skal udnytte at få opgraderet den firmware. Og hvis I ikke har lyst til det selv, så kom ind forbi Goecker en dag, så fikser vi det måske ikke lige med det samme, men så meget i løbet af meget kort tid, så får vi lige opgraderet dit kamera. Så gør brug af det. Det er en gratis opgradering af dit kamera. Ikke mere om firmware.
Det kan være, det kommer.
Ja, det kan være, det kommer.
Det kan være, der kommer spørgsmål. Men ja, jeg er også spændt på, hvad Ollie fortæller os og viser os. Jeg har i hvert fald glædet mig.
Yes. Men lad os prøve at rulle over og se, om I kan få hul igennem til England. Hello, Ollie. Welcome. Vi mangler lige... We need some sound from Ollie. Yeah, hang on.
I'm sorry about that. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, that's much better, Ollie.
Yeah. I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
I've forgotten that the web browser defaults to my microphone that's not plugged in and not the correct one.
You're welcome. We have an image and then we have sound from England now. So welcome, Ollie. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. I've realized through all of that fantastic presentation, Stefan, that I know firmware update in Danish now.
Yes, that's good.
It helps. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, okay. So, Ollie, what have you got for us today? I think we have a lot of anxious viewers who are eager to hear about the 2 cameras and your experience with those.
Yeah, great. Well, I mean, they are a fantastic pairing, and I keep sort of pinching myself when I'm reaching for either the C70 or the R5. It's hard to believe that there's just so much power in these tiny little cameras these days, but they are both very unique. They offer specific things depending on the production that we're going into, but in both cases, and in fact in the whole Cinema EOS range and mirrorless cameras as well, I'm finding that there's a solution for almost every situation we find ourselves in at the moment, which is a lovely position to be in. But we're actually using the C70 as our main camera at the moment. Originally, our plan was to look to upgrade our C200 that we had for a number of years, and to upgrade that to probably a C300 or a C500. But when the C70 came out, we realized actually that it was such a flexible camera, and in particular the fact that it's so lightweight and small and can go on a gimbal, that we actually made the decision to kind of put our money into the C70 and use the additional funds to go into new RF lenses and the R5 as well. So that's how we chose to distribute the kind of the budget, if you like, that we had. And what we do now is we rent in C500, C300 for jobs when we need RAW mainly, and in particular with the C300, the 120 frames RAW. But for all other scenarios, which is 90% of what we're shooting, we are very happily getting by with the C70 and the R5 as a B cam, and obviously also as a stills camera for the odd occasion when we get asked to capture stills for clients as well. So a very flexible lineup for us at the moment. What I was hoping to do, if you guys will indulge me, is just show a few examples of some recent productions where we've used both the R5 and the C70, and just to sort of chat around what made me choose, each camera in the specific setup, and hopefully you can see some of the results from the camera. Just a word of warning. My main role in life is as a colorist, and I fear there is some kind of gamma correction going on through the HDMI output from my laptop. So everything that you'll see play back seems to be quite a bit darker than it should be. Please don't judge my color grading skills on what you're about to see.
Just go ahead.
In other words, I'm covering my own back here.
All right.
So if I just switch across to my laptop,
yeah,
I've got a couple of examples here. I thought I might actually start with this project, which is something that I haven't actually finished editing yet. This is actually an assembly. It's fairly cut down assembly, but it's an assembly nonetheless of some footage I shot recently at a jeweler's. I'll just play the first few minutes and then I'll talk around what we're seeing.
Yeah, great.
So if I just pause that there, you can see, I mean, it looks very dark when I'm looking at my web browser. I hope it's slightly brighter the other end, but this is a jeweler's in Bath, which is not far from me. And they are, in fact, in this video, remaking, I should say, my wedding ring. Okay. Here it is, in fact.
Which you
so
lost? Or
it was a bit of an unusual situation, but I got married in 2005, and that jeweler's made mine and my wife's rings to my own design. And I lost my wedding ring in my garden about 6 or 7 years ago, and have been waiting 6 or 7 years for it to turn up, and it never did. No. So I eventually bit the bullet and recommissioned them to remake it, essentially. It turns out gold has shot up in price. It's about 4 times the price that it was back in 2005. So anyway, I was wanting to find an excuse to use the R5 after the firmware update that had dealt with some of the erroneous overheating warnings that it was giving. And I thought this would be a really good test because I wanted to shoot this as detailed as possible. So I I didn't want to capture everything in 8K RAW, but I did want that quality. I wanted that detail that you can get from that incredible full frame sensor in the R5. And the internal 4K HQ mode is perfect for that because it's downsampling in camera from the 8K full frame sensor down into 4K DCI, and it looks incredible. It's so pin sharp that you can really see the benefits. It's also incredibly clean. It's one of the things that I think people often overlook with downsampling. I hear a lot of people say about shooting a higher resolution so they can crop in, so they can punch into the image and give them extra flexibility for reframing. I never do that. I frame my shots the way I want to capture them. I almost never reframe in post. For me, the increased resolution is about lower noise because you are shrinking down essentially the image. So any artifacting, any noise gets smaller and less noticeable, and you're getting this perceived, essentially the kind of the quality, the image density, if you like, the pixel density increasing as you downsample. So right back from probably a decade ago when we first started shooting 4K so that we could downsample it to HD. Same reasons now that I really enjoy using the R5's 4K HQ to downsample that 8K image and give me that very crisp, beautiful, low noise image. So this is in a Bath. If you've ever been to Bath in the UK, it's a very old Georgian city, and all of the main high street, all the buildings are these very narrow, tall Georgian buildings, and they almost always have these vaulted subterranean basements. And it is in one of these basements that they have the workshop for this jewelers. So there's no windows at all.
Did you add
in fact, I lit this whole thing just with one Asteria Titan tube, just because it was battery powered and easy and small, and I could get it up and out of the way. Okay. So the entire thing's lit with just one LED tube, and as you may or may not be able to see, depends how good the quality is across this connection. But there is almost no noise in the shadows at all. It's a very clean image, but at the same time, it's very detailed. And you know, I knew that was going to be particularly important with bits like this, where I wanted to really focus on the reflections in the glasses of the jeweler here and the catch light in the eyes. I knew there would be, flames. I knew there'd be torches burning things, melting the metal. And all of those processes I knew I wanted to capture in a lot of detail, but without having to resort to pushing the camera right in there. I have a lovely, it's actually on my R5, which is behind me at the moment. I have a lovely RF lens, the 35mm f1.8, which is one of my favorite RF lenses, actually. It's also one of the cheaper ones, but it's incredibly lightweight, small, compact, stabilized, got built-in IS, obviously very fast, 1.8, but it's also macro. And that's amazing when you shoot macro, very close details, and partner that with the 8K or the 4K HQ of the R5. It's incredible the detail you get. But I didn't want to have to be constantly telling the story right up in in the scene. Basically, I wanted to be able just to step back a little and kind of get a sense more of the working environment. And the working environment is actually relatively small. They just have these little benches in front of them, which are sort of slightly wider than a human, and everything, all of their tools are all within hand's reach. So I wanted that 35mm frame, but without using the macro, basically. And the R5 helped with all of that. All of those little decisions, creative decisions, practical decisions, needing a fast lens, needing a detailed image, they all, they kind of inexorably lead to this decision which lands you with the camera that you choose. And the R5 was the perfect camera for this. It also obviously has the ability to shoot 120 frames. And there were only two, actually. I don't like overusing high frame rate stuff, but there were two scenes where I knew that it'd be good to capture in 120 frames. There was, let me see if I can find the bit and show it to you. Here they are. So there was
What was your gain level, Ollie, when you're in this footage? Which gain level did you choose?
Sorry, just say that again, Stefan. I couldn't quite hear you then.
So, which gain level did you choose in this environment?
So I, from memory, I think I'm at 800. I might have been at 400, but I think it was. I had a feeling it was 800. So you know, high enough to get some, you know, get the exposure that I needed, but also very clean. I mean, all of Canon's lineup now are incredibly clean in the shadows. The C200, which we used for a number of years, I was always very happy with that camera. I loved the image from it. I never felt that it was a noisy camera. But then all of these newer crop, and since we've moved over to the C70, it's just a kind of a next level of clean image. And I know some people don't like a very overly clean sort of digital looking image. I personally like that look. I like a very detailed, clean digital image because it gives me the ability to align shots and get continuity right between cameras. And then I can always kind of tarnish the image in post anyway. I'd rather capture the optimum image and then kind of bring it back or add that certain aesthetic afterwards. But for me, I appreciate just how clean this current crop of cameras is. In fact, it might be relevant then for me to talk about another video I've got here, because just coming to this idea of a slightly dirty image, a slightly more characterful image. If I just show you this film here, so this is I don't know how much audio we've got here. This is an interview. I won't play the whole thing. I don't think it's even been released yet, actually. But this interview was a pretty straightforward 2-camera interview, multicam shoot. This is our A cam, and this was C500 Mark II. And we wanted to use the Sumire. So we've got the Canon Sumire primes, cine primes on the C500 Mark II here. And when they're wide open, they give a slightly more characterful image. And once we'd established that we wanted that as our A camera, it then stood to reason that we partnered it with a second camera. It's not always practical to choose the same camera. So although it makes sense to have 2 C500s, for example, as an A and a B cam, it's not always practical or within the budget. And in this case, we only wanted to be able to hire the one C500, and I really wanted to be able to use our C70 as the B cam. But I was worried because that's kind of almost the highest part of Canon's Cinema EOS range and the lowest part of Canon's Cinema EOS range. And I was a bit concerned, were they going to match? But we decided to go for it, and for budgetary reasons, that we paired a C70 as the B cam. But it was only a few days before that it occurred to me, of course, the Sumires are so characterful that actually it would look a bit wrong if we used stills lenses on the C70. It might make that disparity even more obvious. So I suddenly thought, right, I need to be able to mount these Sumires, their PL mount, and mount them on the C70. But luckily, RF is such a easy mount to adapt. I discovered that not only was there a solution, there's actually multiple solutions from people like Metabones, Wooden Camera, Kipatai. They've all got RF to PL mount adapters in the market now. And so this second angle, if I just cut back,
specifications then say an Alexa Mini, and it could shoot true 4K and full frame. No, we thought this was a no-brainer. All we have to do is
so this angle here. This is our C70. Not only does it match perfectly in terms of color and contrast, as I've come to expect with all of Canon's range, they're always perfectly matched. The look was there. There was that matching look. There was that out of focus quality that we were getting from the Sumires on the main camera, replicated on our B camera. And I was, incredibly happy actually.
Make sure our clients
how little work it took in post. To get these to match. In fact,
all we have to do
These are pretty much
we have all
the final images out of the camera. And we shot wide DR as well, so it's not like this was a heavily color graded image. This is pretty much what you see is what you get from those two cameras. So I was incredibly happy, and it was one of those moments where there was a bit of a reassuring. Oh, you know, I've made a good decision here. I was really pleased anyway that we'd decided to go with the C70 and kind of get it in-house as one of the cameras that we invested in. But even more happy when I realised just how flexible the mounting options are for this camera and indeed any RF camera. So that was a good shoot to be able to work with that camera. And once we were done with the interview, the C70 being so small and light, it goes on a gimbal very easily. So we have the DJI RS2, and literally just took the camera straight off the tripod, straight onto the gimbal, and then we're off and about shooting B-roll to accompany this this interview footage that we've got here. So I think in terms of workflow, which just the practical workflow of reaching for a camera and capturing the shot that you need during a production, I think that can't be overstated either in terms of the way that the C70 and the R5 work in that way. And although obviously the R5 would very happily go on a gimbal, the fact that the C70 goes on as well just gives that extra edge. We've got that extra dynamic range because we have the 16 plus stops of dynamic range in the C70, plus the built-in NDs, plus professional audio. So that actually gives us not just the ability to get nice B-roll on the gimbal, but to actually, if we choose to, capture really high quality interview or piece to camera or you know, a camera footage from that setup. And I've got another example here of exactly that. If I just cut to my feed. So this is a project we only filmed a few weeks ago. We have an organisation called the Royal Horticultural Society, the RHS in the UK, and you may have heard of them in regard to the Chelsea Flower Show, and they put on big flower shows in the UK every year. Due to COVID, the Chelsea Flower Show has been moved to September, but the RHS are one of my clients, and they asked me if I could, as part of a number of different teams, go and capture footage for a virtual Chelsea to happen in May when it would normally be the flower show. So I went down to Kent, and it was just me, and I'll give you a bit more background actually. So it was just me filming. There was a sound recordist with me, but I was the only camera operator. Very kind of last minute. We didn't really know what we were filming until we were there. And it was basically an interview between this lady who you just saw. Her name's Arit. She's a presenter on a program called Gardener's World, and she was interviewing a landscape architect called Marion, and they were talking about biodiversity and sustainable garden design. So there was straight away, I was like, okay, so this is a 2-camera conversation I had to capture on my own. So I used the C70 and the R5 as A and B cams, getting over the shoulder for the 2 angles. I can show you briefly those angles here. So that was our one of our angles for Marion. That was our other angle. You know, there aren't many cameras that you can kind of trust with the autofocus, but someone asked me recently, so you trust the autofocus? Do you use the autofocus sometimes? And I had to laugh because I don't think I've not used the autofocus on a Canon camera for about 5 years. The autofocus system on these cameras is insane. I mean, particularly the R5. I literally have no idea how they do it. But to be able to just leave a camera, and I wasn't even able to physically go and check on it, just to frame it and hit record and know that it's going to be pinpoint, even wide open, you know, it changes the way we work. I'm not saying that I want to always go out on my own and shoot a 2-person interview. Hopefully next time we'll have a second operator at least. But it means if you find yourself in those situations, you have an answer. You have a solution to that problem, and you can get something, and not just something that's passable, but had incredibly good feedback about this project. The RHS themselves, the client.
Ollie, just got one thing I wanted to say to the viewers in Danish. Husk, I kan stille spørgsmål undervejs til Ollie, hvis I sidder inde med nogle ting, I godt vil have ham til at uddybe. I kan bare skrive på dansk. Vi skal nok prøve at oversætte til engelsk. All right, Ollie, I'm back. I was just encouraging people to put questions to you if they have any.
Good point.
Ollie,
yes, please,
maybe
please.
I can give a short question to all what you have been showing us now. How do you see the R5 and the C70 match up in the shadows when using the gain level that you're working with on the scenarios you have shown us here?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously the R5 now, as you so brilliantly demonstrated in your slides there, now has C-Log3. And this shot, in fact, was captured in C-Log3. There were no deep shadows. I didn't need the extra stop at the bottom. So I captured this to C-Log3. And not that we were having to match with the R5 at this particular time, but the fact that the R5 now has that C-Log3 gamma as well makes obviously matching those black points much, much easier than when it was just C-Log. The black point with C-Log and C-Log3 is actually the same. It's the highlights that differ between the two. But I think broadly when you're shooting with those two cameras, the key thing for me is not so much the contrast. The contrast is very much obviously tied to your exposure and where you're placing middle grey. But the more tricky thing, and the thing that's out of your control to a certain extent, is just the way that it's capturing and distributing those colours. And the neutral colour matrix, which is now the default colour matrix on all the Cinema EOS range and on the mirrorless cameras when you're outputting to an external recorder, Canon have made sure that neutral colour matrix captures and plots those colours precisely the same way. So it means that when you're moving from one camera to the other, there's no movement at all in terms of colour. There's not, oh, well, this has got a slight green look, or this doesn't quite map reds in quite the same way. There's none of that. So you can very happily pick any of Canon's Cinema EOS or mirrorless or the 1DX Mark III, any of these newer cameras with the neutral colour matrix, and shoot and get matching colours out of any of them in that neutral colour matrix, which is that for me is a much bigger potential problem, and one that's solved very nicely by the way that Canon have engineered these cameras.
And
let me play you this shot because sorry, let me just play this one shot just to show because it's on the gimbal.
Brain talks about the many layers that are important within the space, the ground cover, perennials coming through, and some of the main shrubs that offer shade.
Run our microphones
importantly, if you listen closely, you'll hear the bees and all of that biodiversity.
We've got the autofocus working, we've got the ND built in. So that was a tracking... Oh, I've lost you guys. There you are. Yeah. I thought maybe you'd vanished then. So obviously that was me walking backwards, holding the gimbal, so a walking piece to camera. But we need to be able to feed the mix from the sound recorder into the camera. Those are all things you can do with a mirrorless camera, but much easier to be able to do them with the C70. We could jam timecode using the timecode input. We could run our mics into it. We could use the ND and get the exposure exactly how we wanted it without having to fiddle with vary NDs on the lens. So that's just one example of where actually the C70 on the gimbal gives us additional options, gives us a shot that I think is one of the better shots in the whole piece. And then immediately followed actually in the edit, this is actually stock, but the next images
in a space like this, I can see how Marion
shots at 120 frames per second. Of this beehive that was in the garden.
I can see how Marion...
again, it's that flexibility. Flicker switch, 120 frames, flick back on a gimbal, walking backwards with the built-in ND. That there's so many options in such a small camera. It's a huge benefit.
Great. Ollie, I think we have one question here.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. What RF lenses do you use with the R5 and why?
So obviously with the C70 and the R5, they're both RF. So the RF lenses we can use across both of them. I was an early adopter of RF lenses. I got several of them I've had since the EOS R first came out, and I was immediately impressed with them. So we have the 24-105 f4, which is a great versatile lens, particularly for daylight shooting and stuff like this where it's a bit reactive, multicam, kind of how-tos, documentary style, ENG, very useful lens for that kind of stuff. Although, obviously, with the Cine zooms coming to the R5 with this future update, firmware update, that's going to be very interesting because I can see then rigging that camera for over-the-shoulder or on-the-shoulder documentary style and ENG style work with those Cine zooms, which would be very interesting. But at the moment, the 24-105 is kind of our equivalent of that. We've got the 50mm f1.2, and in fact, that's the lens I'm using right now on our C70. So it's the C70 I'm using right now for this talk. The 50mm f1.2 RF is a beautiful lens, really, really beautiful, sharp across the board. What else have we got? We've got the 35mm f1.8 that I mentioned previously. One of my favorite lenses. We use that a lot on the gimbal. Those are my main go-to. The 2870 is another incredible lens. Very heavy, but really, really nice, particularly for stills, actually, I find with the R5. I don't own, but I often rent in the 70-200, the f2.8 RF, which is mind-blowing how they've managed to create a lens that's even better than the one of the holy trinity, the 70-200 EF 2.8, which is an amazing lens, but is always one that you have to kind of rig in an additional way with lens support. It's a heavy lens. The RF equivalent of the 70-200 f2.8 is so light, so small. You kind of look at it when you get it and think, what have they done? How have they managed this? But it's actually a better lens than the EF equivalent in a much smaller, lighter package, and has built-in stabilization, obviously. Beautiful lens. So that's another good one that I like to use with the R5 or the C70.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of, let me come back out of this one. In terms of matching those two cameras, just to pick up on what Stefan was saying before, that firmware update with the C-Log 3 that came recently, I think is an incredibly important one with the R5. But also in terms of the C70, the ability to capture in 10-bit 422 C-Log 2, so that gives you the maximum amount of dynamic range that the sensor can retain. With the DGO, the dual gain outputs of that sensor, it's the same sensor that's in the C300 Mark III. That combination of a high quality codec with a high capability sensor that can resolve so much information in such a large dynamic range, it really does give you a camera that, despite its price tag and its size and its kind of positioning, if you like, within the lineup, it really punches above its weight. And I can't speak highly enough of the image quality that we're getting out of the C70. The R5 is exactly the same story, but of course you've got RAW on there and the 8K as well. And there are some exciting things that you've got coming up where that 8K RAW is going to be particularly useful for a project that we're working on soon.
Super.
Yeah. But, Ollie,
how are we doing for questions? Are there any other questions that have come in?
Yeah, the thing you also was talking about with the lenses, that is great to hear that you can, of course, you can combine it across the two cameras, but also that you can keep the same level in your post compared to what you have been shooting. And how you said also about the Sumira primes. You have been using that in in the first shot you showed earlier. And how with the mirrors and the 18 to 80 you have used a little bit, and then the RF lenses and the EF lenses. How do you see that continuity in the shots you make?
Yeah, so there is a very consistent look. I mean, the EF and the RF lenses actually, the look and feel of them is very similar. They're classically Canon. There's an increased, I think, resolution sharpness often across the RF ones, but they match the EF ones very nicely. And by extension, they therefore match the Cine primes very nicely because those are rehoused, essentially, EF glass. The Sumeres are a kind of a law unto themselves. They are a very distinctive look. But as I said, being able to put that lens, that PL lens on any RF camera or the C500 or C300 by changing the mount gives you, the ability to match them. Oh, I'm now getting feedback from myself.
Jeg tror, vi mistede lyden på Ollie. I think we lost you, Ollie, on the sound. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's not I'm actually now suddenly hearing myself.
Okay. Yes? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
No. Speak up, Ollie. Do you hear us?
No, well, yeah, I hear you, but I also hear myself an awful lot.
Okay.
You're back.
Yeah, you're back. Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Good. Sorry for that.
There's quite a severe... Oh, no, it's gone now. Good. I was hearing myself back quite loudly, so that's fine. The other thing I wanted to mention with the C70 is there's also the 0.71 adapter, which you referenced in your slide at the start, Stefan. We have that adapter, and I'm using it an awful lot with the 16 to 35, the f2.8 Mark III, the EF. It's great to be able to get an equivalent full frame image and an extra stop of light with that adapter. But moreover, those whole range of adapters are giving us a huge amount of flexibility with the R5 in particular. So we still have our EF lenses as well. We haven't sold our EF lenses to get RF lenses. We have both. And where I think that's quite useful is with the R5 when we're using the RF to EF adapter with built-in Vari-ND, which is an inspired bit of kit that Canon brought out when the EOS R came out, is really useful. So we can put our EF lenses on our R5 and zero lag in terms of autofocus or control of the lens at all, but also with the benefit of a Vari-ND that's built in, so we can swap EF lenses without having to remount, screw Vari-NDs. I do think that 0.71 adapter for the C70 and the Vari-ND RF to EF adapter for the R5 are two of my favourite sort of non-lens, non-camera accessories that I have with those cameras. But we also rig up the C70 in various different ways. We've got a couple of different small rig bits for it. There's a base plate that small rig do for the C70, which gives you more mounting options for VCT or Arca or Sackler plates on the bottom, and they give 2 points of contact for a more secure contact. Cages as well. There's a small rig cage. And there's a Kuto have a C70 cage out now. So yeah, there's quite a few options in terms of accessories for these cameras that add even more flexibility for productions as well.
Okay, thank you. I think time is starting to run now. Have you any more important messages to us, Ollie? You probably have, but short ones.
Not really. Although I wish my best to Chris Eriksson, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I was very sorry to see him in your recent Euro match. So that's an important message.
Yes, it is.
I wish your Danish team all success.
Yeah, thank you, and same to England. All right, Ollie, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your input. It was very inspiring, and I'm sure it was a lot of good information to people who consider buying one of these cameras. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. Stefan, det var spændende.
Ja,
der var ikke et fuldstændig 2 streger under resultatet, men det er vel egentlig det, som vi allerede startede med at sige, at det er kameraer, som lapper over på nogle felter, men også har forskellige fordele på hver sit område.
Mange opgaver er jo vidt forskellige derude, og det møder Ollie også i sit daglige arbejde. Ja. Så nej, der er ikke en faseliste på det her, men det er da skønt at høre den kontinuitet, der er, både på sensorplanet, hvor godt det kombineres, og så også det brede udvalg af optikker, der også giver den samme kontinuitet på kryds og tværs. Ikke? Ja. Så ja, der kan være fordele ved den ene og fordele ved den anden, og også fordele ved at arbejde med dem sammen. Ja. Det er klart. Ja. Bestemt. Og interessant her til sidst også, at Ollie siger, at vores mount-adapter med 0,71 gange forstørrelse er jo glimrende på C70-kameraet, fordi den jo har indbygget ND-filter i forvejen. Ja. Og så med det her 1635 2,8 optik, der bliver full frame på C70-kameraet, så det er en meget anvendt optik, 1635 igen, så den får også nyt liv på RF-systemet, hvilket jo er rigtig, rigtig dejligt. Og så ikke mindst ND-filter, den variable adapter, er jo også dejligt at høre, at Ollie bruger den, og er glad for den.
Og som har sin fordel herovre på.
Som har sin fordel på R5'eren. Ja. Og det er jo især for også at få nyt liv til sit EF-glas, og noget af det EF-glas, man måske ikke har brugt på det seneste, men det kan lige pludselig igen også få nyt liv på et nyt kamera. Og det er jo skønt at kombinere alle de her muligheder med os og med Canon-produkterne.
Ja, super. Stefan, tusind tak, fordi du kiggede forbi. Det var rigtig spændende. Og til jer derude, husk, at har I fået blod på tanden til at høre mere om de her kameraer, så kig forbi Goeckers butik og
de
prøv det. Og det mest imponerende er jo, jeg lige vil sige, at der er grønne bobler på vores webshop. De kan leveres fra dag til dag. Ja. Så hold jer ikke tilbage. Tjek ud på hjemmesiden allerede nu om specs, og så kontakt os. Vi er klar til at give jer en demo. Det var rigtig dejligt, at I kiggede med. Husk at holde øje med kommende live-events. De bliver annonceret på YouTube, Facebook og vores nyhedsbrev. Sign op til nyhedsbrevet, så du er også med på den nyhedsstrøm. Og så er det bare at ønske en rigtig god dag derude, og tak fordi I kiggede med. Hej.